Denji came for romance and potentially something else, and he accidentally walked into an existential apocalypse in this new Chainsman chapter, because just when you think that Chainsman can't get any weirder, which that's saying a lot, Fujimoto drops a chapter where Denji tries to build a emotional connection over a dove, only for that moment of fragile humanity to immediately get bulldozed by a complete insect-themed nightmare and a global ecological collapse that is building on the prior ramifications of his actions earlier on in this arc. Because chapter 230 of Chainsman, it is chaotic, it is funny, it is unhinged at times, it is uncomfortable, and at the same time, it is strangely heartfelt, all simultaneously. On the surface, you might be thinking this is just Denji being Denji, complete gooner mode, crude, desperate, laser focused on sex. Even Yoru jokes about it. But beneath all of that, this chapter quietly reinforces one of Chainsman Part 2's biggest triumphs. Denji, at the end of the day, he's still the same character from Part 1. And again, not gooner, but instead, Denji has always been a character who has chased connection first. He just doesn't know quite how to say it without sounding like a complete idiot at times. And that misunderstanding is exactly what deepens this triangle between Denji, Yoru, and Mitaka, as it also makes a really great callback to the character of Power. As per usual, we'll do a brief recap of this chapter, and then I'll come back to you guys my thoughts on the chapter itself, because I do feel like there's a lot to unpack here. So if I had to choose one sentence to describe this entire chapter, I would say it's a heartfelt and awkward confession that leads to a global horror. So the chapter opens up with Yoru, and she's laughing at Denji's earlier attempt to distract her by using the dove. She asks, why did he think that something like that would ever work on her? Denji, initially, he's deflecting a bit. He's bringing up her earlier promise to sleep with him, but Yoru, she presses him, says basically, hey fam, just answer me honestly. That's when Denji reveals something unexpectedly sincere. He explains how he once knew a devil, Power, who also had a soft spot for animals, Meowie, even though she did try to kill him at one point. He says that he hoped that Yoru might be like her. Again, he is talking about Power without actually saying her name. Yoru then asks, why would that matter to him? And Denji at this point pauses. He doesn't have a clear answer. And at a moment of certainty, he admits the truth. He's lonely. He just wants a friend. Yoru responds by saying, hey, we should just simply be friends then. And that's when Denji immediately cuts in. It's like, hey, hold on a second. We can be friends, but there's this thing called friends with benefits. Me and you, we gotta have sex, and a lot of it. This bluntness obviously makes Yoru laugh. She doesn't get offended. Yoru, as we know, she doesn't hesitate to jump to that point if it gets her what she wants, and most importantly, Yoru's just as crude as Denji. So she relents, saying that while she hates Chainsaw Man, she actually likes Denji, which that gives credence to a lot of the theories that are out there that Yoru was actually developing feelings for Denji, just like how Mitaka was, and given what we saw in the last chapter, it definitely adds credence to that theory. So Yoru gives him blood to stabilize him, and she claims that Mitaka is consenting as well, which boy oh boy, that's a whole nother topic of conversation. Denji then transforms back into his human form. He's overwhelmed, nearly crying, bursting into a static celebration because our boy's finally about to lose his virginity. And that emotional moment, it lasts for all of 5 seconds. Probably as long as Denji would have lasted had they have actually done the deed. They are suddenly swamped by insects and pest-related devils. This scene completely escalates with the arrival of 3 very ominous figures. One has a spiked head, one has a hollowed, sunken face, another one has a crescent moon-like face, and the perspective at this point, Fujimoto takes the lens and he shifts it overseas. And this is very interesting because we're seeing more of these Fumiko devils. So over in India, that nation's Fumiko is watching as bats are flooding the skies, and they're eating humans in large numbers. Her Canadian counterpart reports that there's a matching outburst that is happening over in Canada, but instead it's roaches. The Canadian Fumiko comes up with a theory that species that are known for extreme fertility, which normally would cull their young to maintain balance, they're no longer needed to do so because of the death devil being eaten. So with death seemingly being disrupted, Their populations are exploding uncontrollably, which is a really bad deal. And this is Fujimoto giving us a glimpse into the reality. Death is something that, depending on how you view it, has a role to play in real life. And because of these uncontrollable numbers that are just going to continue to grow and swarm, they have to feed on humans because they're going to run out of resources otherwise. With no natural life to end, humanity now fears insects more than ever. Basically, upscaling takes place. And mid-conversation, that's when the Fumiko over in India ends up getting eaten. And then we see the Canadian Fumiko completely unfazed. And she's reflecting on how global representatives once met back in the day to discuss their personal fears. She hadn't known hers until roaches began to pour in through her doorway, giving her clarity in the worst possible way, in an ironic way at that. Now, when we go back over to the battlefield, Yoru is telling Denji to run. She says, hey, we are both very, very critically low on blood. Now is not the time to fight. And for a moment, we see Mitaka snap back to the surface. And that snaps Denji back into reality. However, Denji refuses to flee. He protests that he was finally about to achieve his long-awaited goal. He starts repeating his iconic line from part 1. If you're in our way, and then he stopped. He turns to Pochita and he asks, how does the quote end? That is very important, as we'll touch on in a moment. As the Crescent Moon Devil prepares to strike, Denji can't fully remember the final word because the concept of death itself has been eaten. Very ironic. Now, with the recap out of the way, which that one went a little longer than expected, Denji and Yoru and Mitaka and just that entire trio of characters, they get a lot of development in this chapter, especially when you realize what Fujimoto is saying about the fear of living forever. So this chapter, if you haven't caught on by now, it directly builds on the previous one, where Yoru told Mitaka that the things that she called sins are nothing to a devil. That statement wasn't just philosophical. It's now being tested through Denji himself when you think about it. Denji doesn't approach morality the same way that Mitaka does. He approaches connection through instinct, animals, food, touch. These are his emotional language when you think about it. When he says that he stayed because Yoru cared about animals, that isn't shallow. That's a surface level way of viewing it. It's the exact same bridge that he built with Power. Power saved Meowie and was going out of her way to save Meowie from the Bat Devil. Denji realized that Power could love something, so Denji bonded with her over that shared vulnerability. Now we see that pattern repeating. Yoru showed a hint of empathy towards animals. Denji sees Power in that moment, and so he's choosing to trust Yoru all over again. Denji's life has been structured through parallels when you think about it. Power, she offered intimacy. I'll let you touch my chest. Denji went for it. Yoru is offering a different kind of bargain. I'll let you have sex with me. Denji is trying to go for it. But moments like this, they truly disguise the fact that Denji is searching for belonging under a very crude negotiation. And just like in real life, growth in Chainsaw Man, it is very messy. Yoru may have shown some empathy in the last chapter, but she is still very capable of manipulation should she choose so. Her claim that Mitaka is consenting is, in my opinion, intentionally questionable. Fujimoto does leave some ambiguity unresolved because people do relapse into selfishness all the time, even after learning better. That moral instability, that is a central theme of Mitaka and Yoru's shared existence. But now the waters have been muddied because one thing that we do know is that Yoru does feel empathy with Mitaka. Meanwhile, you also have that insect apocalypse, and that mirrors this personal imbalance on a global scale when you look at that. Creatures that once relied upon death to regulate life now reproduce endlessly, showing how death and life go hand in hand. Without endings, existence, they become grotesque. Weak devils tied to insects, they are suddenly upscaled in power because humanity now fears unchecked survival more than extinction. This is also another example of be careful what you wish for, a monkey's paw scenario. People often say, what would it be like to live forever? And they don't think about the other consequences that come from death not existing. Fujimoto is showing that to us. This is why something like even the Locust Devil did matter. The story is exploring where life without death is truly leading humanity. There's no salvation, but instead there's only horror. Locusts in biblical terms were also a sign of a precursor to plague and death. When you look back at the locust devil, that was all foreshadowing. Denji forgetting how to say the word die as a part of his iconic line, that's both comedic and devastating. His identity as Chainsaw Man is being defined by killing devils, and that is also collapsing in a reality where death itself is missing. This is building on even further one of the central questions that we have about Denji and Chainsaw Man in Chainsaw Man Part 2. Are you Denji because you're Chainsaw Man, or are you Chainsaw Man because you're Denji? So while Denji does think he's chasing sex, what he's actually confronting is a much larger question. If nothing can end, how do you live with anything at all? That tension between Mitaka's guilt, Yoru's very warped sense of pragmatism, and Denji's desperate longing for connection, it feels like the foundation for the final arc is beginning, in my opinion. And in classic Fujimoto fashion, it all started with Denji hoping that someone might care for animals the same way that Power did. While Chainsaw Man is going to be on break next week, stay tuned because I do have a video back confirmed from a new editor that is a really good Aki Hayakawa video essay that I think you guys are going to love. It's taken a minute to find an editor who can work within budget for video essays on Chainsaw Man, since this channel is smaller than Naruto Explained. So moving forward, there will be more content for Chainsaw Man to fill the void when we don't have chapters. Normally, I'd edit the video myself, but running Naruto Explained and everything One Piece Explained, those channels take up a lot of time, particularly Naruto Explained, since I upload there daily. So we'll do the Aki video first, and probably someone else from OG Chainsaw Man. I've already done video essays on Power and the Darkness Devil, 2 on Makima. So we'll probably do one more, and then we'll move to the Mitaka video essay that I wrote out several months ago.